Put a little more bass on it so we sound older.
Yeah. The cane reminds me, by the way, of, it looks like Arizona to me.
Yeah, it does. It's not so sterile that it looks really bad, and not so, there's no little squirrels crawling up and down the handle and all that sort of stuff.
That's one of the things I always kind of mix up in my head about your life, is that you're a Nebraskan, but you're an Arizonan. Where are you born?
Columbus, Nebraska.
Where does Arizona come into the picture?
My younger brother, God rest his soul, had rheumatic fever. He's 5 years younger, was 5 years younger than I am. And we had to go to a hot and dry climate when Arizona was hot and dry, not crowded and muggy and all that sort of stuff. And he had to learn how to walk again. So I was in the fourth grade when we moved. So,
and you were there for how long?
Well, I went there in the fourth grade. I don't know how long that was. And I spent all my schooling from that point on, including 2 years at Arizona State College at Flagstaff, which is now Northern Arizona University, and then 2 years at ASU, which was ASC at that time, at Arizona State University. And I got my bachelor's and master's there. Taught for 12 years, 6 years in two places. And then my aunt and uncle, who were very prominent in Columbus, kind of undercover or whatever they say. But the college was just getting started, and I was on my way back to Chicago to do a music something or other, I don't know what, and stopped in Columbus to see Seal and Ferd, my aunt and uncle. And they told me about the college, and they said, why don't we take you up and we'll introduce you around because they're getting ready to build it and all that sort of stuff. And I said, okay. So I went up and I met all of the president and Evelyn Bruger. Evelyn Bruger had retired before you came there. And just the people who were key in building the college. And I was president of the Arizona Music Educators, and they were having a convention in Chicago or in Washington, D.C. for 10 days. And so she wanted to use my name and recommend what pianos to buy and what all the electronic that goes with being a music department. So that supposedly gave my letter some clout. That's how I came to know the people there, and I would come back every once in a while. So that was a good thing. The bad thing, that one of the weekends was the same weekend as Woodstock, so I didn't get to go to Woodstock, even though it was only just down the road a little ways from Washington. So I never let her forget that. So kept in touch with Evelyn Bruger, who, God rest her soul, was the head of the fine arts and English and all those class courses.
And they said, we're going to start a music program with this college we're building.
Yep. Well, she was a little beyond that. She said, we want you to come back and look because we are starting a music program, and we think you'd be just the right person for the job. I came to the college in 71.
In 71.
I taught 12 years in Arizona and 29 years in Nebraska.
Yeah. When Evelyn says to you, we think you're the guy, what were they wanting out of you to inaugurate this music department? When it came to you, were they already saying, we want a choir, we want a band, and we want you to do all of this stuff?
More or less. They flew me back. I'd already signed my contract to go back to McClintock for the next year. But this was in April, I guess, or April, I don't know. And sat down with Evelyn when we were all done, and Dr. Newport, who was the president of the college, nice guy, and he started a lot of colleges throughout the Midwest. So she said, we talked about the job and what it was going to be and all that sort of stuff. You're bringing back memories. So, and I said, what are you looking for? And she said, we want a good music teacher. We don't want a good band director and a good choir director. We want a good music, fine arts person. Well, I had my bachelor's degree in instrumental music, my master's degree in choral music, another master's degree in fine arts and humanities. And then a few years down the line, I had another master's degree in history, but I never taught any history. And so she said, we're looking for someone who is real good in all of it. You know, it was so compartmentalized in those days. When you were in college, you couldn't major in both instrumental and vocal music. And I said, well, I'll think it over, but I don't think I'm going to be interested, although it's a tremendous compliment. And she said, well, you have 2 weeks. And I said, okay, well, I can do that. And so we spent another day and looking over the community and looked at the real estate and just got a handle of it, because that summer I was going to Europe for 5 weeks with the Northern Arizona University Choir, which was Mel Kinney, which I've talked about Mel, and I think you know. And so I wasn't going to get back in time for the time that school started. Don't worry about it, John. We'll cover for you. You know, we whatever you want to do, we'll pay for your moving expenses. We'll do this and we'll do that and all this and whatever you need.
They were really going after you.
Yeah. So we drove into Omaha. And when we pulled into Epley, and I was getting my suitcase out of the car, she said, "Oh, by the way, let's just save some time. Here's your contract. Let me have it back in a week." And I said, "What? That's not what you said." And she said, "Well, think it over, and you got time, and just let us know." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And so the summer, I decided I was going to do it. But then I moved everything back early in the summer, and then went on tour for 5 weeks to Europe, and we went even beyond the Iron Curtain in Austria and Mel's Choir.
With Mel's Choir.
I was a rehearsal director, and he was the director, which means I did all the work and he took all the bows. You know how that goes. But he's a good person. I really loved him. So then I got back, and everything was set, I thought. And I got off the airplane in Chicago, and they were going to fly on into Phoenix, because I just got off. I was the only one to go off. And when I got off that plane and walked down the, whatever it's called now, and got into Omaha at about 4 a.m, and Evelyn was there to meet me. And she came up and she gave me a real big hug, and she said, "I've got good news and bad news." And I said, "Well, okay, what's the good news?" And she said, "Well, I'm glad you're here and we really want to welcome you." And she gave me a big hug and everything. "Okay, what's the bad news?" "Well, Dr. Newport retired last week, who was the president of the whole college and had the whole thing." And I said, "Hold that plane, I don't want to do that." But it had already left. It was too late. And then I had a class to teach at 8 o'clock that morning. We didn't get in till like 6. Wow. So I walked in, what am I even doing? I don't know. But it was fun. It was.
So they had already built the facilities then. They just didn't have a staff. You were it.
No. And Dick Abraham, who you remember, God rest his soul, he was the art teacher, and he was the same way. We had pianos. We bought pianos, or they bought pianos during the year because there was a lot of grant money and new colleges starting. And I suppose they had enough money for music and enough money for all this sort of stuff, except I didn't have any music money. We had the pianos. That's all we had in that room, and chairs. And Abe didn't even have chairs in his art room. He just walked in, paint the walls any color you want them, and do this and do that. And so that's the way the college was the first couple of years, but it was a lot of fun. And
when is Dick Averett added into the mix on the theater?
Dick was there the year before.
Okay.
He was the first person, and Abe and I came together.
Okay.
So
yeah, you three gentlemen are the ones I think of.
Started the whole fine arts program.
Yeah.
Yep.
Central Community College in Columbus, Nebraska, where I attended.
Yes.
After high school, and
that's how we met.
Yeah.
Who was your director?
In Tecumseh High School, it was a guy named Tom Doran, who's still there, and I thought I was just going to come to college and study hard. At least I had grand designs. Right. But as I recall, we talked about it in your office, and I said, no, thank you. But then I think the day before I moved in, I got a phone call from you saying you were in need of a drummer and you knew that I sang somehow. But I never auditioned.
Well, I'm sure Tom probably told me that.
I guess.
Yeah.
But I never auditioned. I just showed up to rehearsal, and you got me to say yes on the phone. And I said, okay. So you told me when you move in to the dorm, find a guy named Topher or a guy named Derek, or, I think you mentioned Rachel, these people who would become my friends in the singing group. And they'll tell you how to get to my house. And then we all went out to your house and met one another. And I was just a fish out of water. I had just signed up for this Chorale and Cantari group. It's this elite singing group, kind of a show choir, but also we did sacred music, and the group would tour around the country, and you did it for 30 years.
29. Let me digress. The Chorale was from fall of 71 to spring of 73. And we started some easy touring, just throughout the state and fairly close to the campus and all that sort of stuff. And in the spring of 73, it was time for auditions again. And there were so many people. There was 110 people that auditioned. And I thought, this is not going to work, And so that's when I decided on the spot. So we're going to start a different group and call it Cantari. And it's a show choir, but we're going to do different music, all different music. We may do some of the chorale music, but chorale will never be a show choir. It's going to be the more serious and I went home that night and wrote a course outline and everything for what Cantari was going to be and what chorale was going to be. And that's the way it became. And I took to Evelyn the next day, and she took it to the president, and they ran it through the college, and voila, I knew and
it was done.
It was done. The Cantari, we started, I take it back, we started as Cantari. And then I got somebody to audition, that's when I did it.
Gotcha.
We had 7 in the group. Anyway, they came up after one rehearsal and they said, can we do something besides choir, you know? And that's when we decided to audition for Chorale, and there were about 10 or 12, and, you know, I picked 7 because we had to all fit in one van. Had nothing to do with the music. We had to keep all of our equipment.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it just all fit together.
So one of the things that happened with me was I started to play in this group, and I found out very quickly that it had a reputation as being kind of an elite group.
Yeah.
But by the time I came along, you had relationships with the Disney theme parks,
Yeah.
with cruise ships,
Yeah.
St. Louis Cathedral, just to name a few of the places we performed, Knott's Berry Farm. So can you tell me a little bit about how your relationship with Disney, for example, begins? And when I was in the group, you could just phone them up and say, hey,
Yeah.
it's John in Nebraska.
Yeah.
How did the first Disney gig happen?
Well, I was in the band at ASU, and we went there the first year that Disney opened. And so you know who I am, and so I was talking to people and everything else, and I said, we might want to be here every 2 years, because I didn't know what I was going to do at that point. Well, just give us a call, and we'll, you know, send us a tape and all that sort of stuff. And I said, okay, and I got this lady's name and this man's name, and I don't remember that. In high school, we only went for 4 days, like we'd leave on Friday. We always went over Easter Sunday. Friday we traveled, Saturday we were in Disney, Sunday we were in a church somewhere, and then we came home on Monday, and that was it.
Huh.
You know, or maybe sang at a school on a Monday morning. So that's how that started. And Chorale, we just kept going, and one thing led to another. It was getting harder and harder to tour for 2 reasons. During the school year, number one, it was a lot of class missed, which I wouldn't put up with. And number 2, jobs and everything else. And then that's what we went into more and more schools in Kansas City. And, you know, it just reached out because people would have heard about us, or one thing just led to another. The first time we sang in New Orleans, which you would have gone to, Love Lutheran Church, maybe 60 people there. 2 years later, there was about 100. And then 2 years later than that, there was 200. And 2 years, I mean, that's just, and of course the word spread. And
Yeah, so you would tour to the Southeast United States one year, and the following year you'd go to the Southwest.
And we'd do the same itinerary.
Yeah.
Because they knew us. And people would ask about that, Daniel. They said, well, they would say, why do you tour the same place every other year? Because you've been to all these places all these years. And I said, because I know what they are. I know the people. I know what the venue is. I know what the challenges or whatever it is. And I didn't want any surprises. You know, because we got to go behind the scenes at Disneyland.
Yeah.
And we got to go in all these places, and I knew the people to call. I would say, when we're behind the stage at Disney, you don't joke, and you don't mess around, and you don't take pictures, and you don't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, you just smile and say, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it got to the point where they would call me, you know, in about April of the year before. Well, John, it's been time to come back again next year, so what day do you want to come?
Yeah.
And that's how we've done our schedule around that. But
That's
and
pretty
we'd
great.
always leave Sunday of graduation and leave Monday morning, and then be gone for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So, and I said, so you won't go to work? If you got anybody that's getting married or graduating in the first 3 weeks of May, don't even audition, because you've got to go on tour with us.
Right.
And nobody ever argued about it. I couldn't get away with that anymore, I don't think.
I was going to ask you that question, because you did have, it did appear at first glance to be a very strict list of policies, but it worked for the group, and everyone signed on knowing what it was. You were always upfront about it. There was also the rule about not missing rehearsal. Doesn't matter if you're sick.
Yeah. We always rehearsed on every other Monday and every Wednesday, but that was all on the schedule. And I'd been to L.A. doing something. I don't remember what, some workshop, doesn't matter, some music. And it's one of those things, when I got on the plane Sunday night, I was fine. And by the time I got to my seat, I was sicker than I don't know what it was. Something just went like this between my eyes, and you're sick now. And oh my God, I was so miserable. And got home all right and went to school. And it was probably early evening. And I called Evelyn and I said, I'm not going to be at school tomorrow, but we are going to have rehearsal. Well, I'm sick. You need to know, just tell. And then I called, I don't remember who, one of the singers, one of the just spread the word in the dorm that I'm not going to be there, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I was there, and we were on the stage. I never will forget. But beforehand, probably around Thanksgiving, Dusty, he was from, what town? Doesn't matter. He called my office just before choir, and he said, John, I'm really, really sick. I just don't think I can come to rehearsal. And, who am I talking to? Yeah, well, Dustin Primer. This is Dusty. Yeah, and what are you telling me? Well, I can't come to rehearsal. Are you in chorale? Yeah. Oh, okay, I'll be there. I mean, that's it was really great. And he came, and I said, you got to sit in the back, and and we'll wrap in blankets and whatever we can to break that fever, and I'll bring you an apple or something. And so he did. So that was fine, because I explained afterwards. I said, if we're staging that day or blocking that day or learning a new choreograph or staging, whatever we're doing it because we're all here. I can't say, well, now, John, remember when Daniel comes back next week, he's got to do this, and you've got to teach him that step. They had to sit up there. It's professional. I told you several times that it's about as professional a group that you'll ever be in without being a professional musician.
Yeah.
And so he called me before Christmas rehearsal, and he said, hey, John, this is Dusty. And I said, what's going on? And he said, well, I just wanted to tell you that I'm sick, but I'm going to come in anyway. And I said, thank you, and he did,
Yeah.
And during the rehearsal, this is when I just came back from California, we were rehearsing, and Jerry Lee, who was our president, and we had him fooled. He was just, when he wanted to get away from the president's office, he came over and listened to our rehearsal. So we were rehearsing, and so we took a break, and when we took a break, I just kind of leaned against the piano, and whatever they did, I'll go use the restroom, and they mostly just hang around. And he came up on the stage and was walking toward me, and he said, how was the trip to California? And I said, well, Jerry, I've been really pretty sick all day, and it was a bad flight back from L.A., and I'm just not doing well. And he said, well, what are you doing here, man? And Dustin, who was sitting on the piano bench, looked up and he said, well, some idiot has this rule that if we're sick, we have to come to rehearse. And he looked at him and he didn't know what we were talking about. But I would tell that story one time. So
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories like that.
There are. I remember getting caught one time in choir with gum in my mouth. And that was a big no-no. And with choir, it was all the chorale people, but also anybody could, I think, be in the choir.
Anybody want to sing, yeah.
Yeah. And so you looked at me and you just said, Daniel, do you have gum in your mouth right now? And I said, gulp.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Yeah. No, sir. Yeah.
And there's a rule about if the vans leave at 7:00, then that's when they leave. And if you're not on the van, then we're leaving without you.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you if you thought you could get away with that today, but you just
never gave it a
answered
thought.
No?
It just was done.
You must have had pushback over the years. People must have said, that seems out of line.
No, that was a whole different time, my friend.
Yeah.
It was just accepted. It was just accepted. And it was all by word of mouth. Like when you auditioned, this is what it is and this is what's expected. There was never anything written. There was never a syllabus. There was never any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And,
you were also very prepared, though, because I remember first day, you had a list of all the places we were going to be and all the rehearsals and all the times. Yeah. Everything was mapped out for the next however many months, the whole year, I guess.
Yeah. I would say you could take this list. When you auditioned in April, you knew that you made it. And I was not going to say, well, I'll send you a letter in 2 days that would say, sorry, you didn't make it. Or what. I mean, you knew, which was fun sometimes because sometimes there were two people from the same school and they rode together. And when they went home, one made it and didn't. And I never did know what they talk about on the way home.
Or brothers and sisters or girlfriends and boyfriends, and one would make it and the other wouldn't.
But see, I didn't even pay any attention to that because I didn't know who they were and I didn't want to know who they were.
Right.
I wish I could have auditioned them around behind a curtain or something, but a lot of stories about auditions. But one girl was from Bellwood. Two of them, they were sisters. And Kate was the first one. I didn't even know she had a younger sister until 6 months into the group. After she had graduated, after Kate had graduated, then Beth was in the group and she said, did you know my sister was in chorale? Really? But And you know how I auditioned? I mean, I just moved people in and out.
Yeah, you're listening for the blend of the choir.
That's all I cared about, you know.
Yeah.
And I had people that were upset afterwards. Well, I was in All-State for 3 years, and I got ones in contests. And I said, I'm not questioning your ability or your any of that sort of stuff. I look for the voices that blend together. And one year, before we were ready to, you know, there was always a point, and they would say, one more time, and let's do that. And I would say, that's it. You know, everybody would go, what? Really? You know, or burst into tears or whatever they did. And one of the singers came back when we took a break, and they knew, you could tell when I was getting close. And she came up and she said, John, that girl in the front row is not even singing. She's just mouthing the words. And I said, really? Yeah, you should listen again. And they were right. I would have put her in because I saw she
was
blended
blending
really
great.
well because there was no, so that was one of them. And yeah, so we got rid of her. So
She was on to you. She knew how to get into the group.
She had it figured out. Yeah, everybody just knew. And the people who were in the group, as you came to learn, I'm sure, they were probably more strict than I was. Or, I mean, they would go up and say, if you make chorale, will you shave your beard or will you do whatever?
Right.
And if they said no, they would just say from the back of the room, and you would have never known, you know. But
Yeah.
So it was.
That's true. There was a no facial hair policy. There was the rule about you're never half in your uniform.
No.
It's all on or it's all gone, you know? And even if it's 150 degrees outside
right.
and we're in the Bahamas in Nassau Square, you do not loosen that tie because that's part of our identity and we
That's
are
right.
uniform. Yeah.
Yeah, and that got to the point. It was a couple of members again came up to me and said, you know, when we go into these schools, you've always said how you make a first impression. And when they see us getting off the schools with tank tops and short shorts and going into their school and all that, that's not a good impression. Mm-hmm. And so, well, what would you suggest? Well, we should wear a nice shirt. And then we had chorale shirts, as you remember, and a pair of slacks or something. So we were released because they're always hanging out the window when we go into the school. And that was, I would have never thought of that. And that was always you know, the first impression getting off that bus or van or whatever we were on. Yeah. I remember one gal, she lost more pair of shoes on tour than I thought. And we got them from J.C. Penney's, so we were always going through.
Yeah.
They were stock items, and but she would just, hey, Coach. They called me Coach every once in a while. I didn't want to ask her why. Hey, Coach, she forgot her shoes again. And they said, yep. They knew that she did, but we would pull into a place that had a Penney's that also had a McDonald's for lunch or whatever. And so she was off buying shoes. And if they didn't have them, they had to be drop shipped to our next day performance that she had to pay for, you know. And so
Wow.
I could tell stories about a lot of people like that.
Oh, I'm sure. I remember, you know, we always had to have our black socks. And I remember Ryan Lucky forgot his black socks one time. And so he used the electrical tape out of the drum case to just wrapped them around wrap the tape around his.
That was in Spalding.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah. Well, the rules are the rules. And I always just say, you know, but it's all about, and you know that in the classroom and a job and everything else, it's all about discipline. And if you're not disciplined in yourself, then we're out of luck, really. Sometime it'll come back and bite us all.
Yeah, I think we all grew a lot in those years. You're the one who taught me that the best drummer is the one you don't notice.
Yep.
I practiced like crazy.
But we started, as you remember, that very first day of rehearsal, we started rehearsing the music.
Right. First thing is always the music.
Yep. And the next remembrance that I had is we never used the piano for about the first 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how to read music. Well, yeah, you do, and you're going to learn, you know, and that we would go through a whole semester and never get away from the piano.
Yeah. We used to get together in the dorm all the time and just sing together and practice. And
that's
helpful. Well, I could talk to you about those days at length, I think, but I'd be curious to know just a little bit more about music in your life and where it started for you. Do you have an early music memory? Your parents were involved in music, or your father was?
Well, yeah, my dad was a professional fireman, but he used to book dances in Columbus, the city hall, and they would bring in all the polka bands, you know, and all that sort of stuff, even Lawrence Welk. So I've been around music, all that sort of stuff, and I'd get to go watch them and set up and watch them dance. And my mom was a secretary, and she retired after many, many years at this elementary school. And I guess it was just something we always did. But
I know you as a piano player. Did they force you into piano lessons at some point?
No.
How did you learn to play?
I started piano at about 4 or 5 years old. And, it was the same thing. I'm practicing piano. Mom, the kids are all outside playing. Well, finish your practice.
Oh,
and you can go outside.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it came time. Oh, my gosh. It came time to think about doing something else with music. And the band director at the elementary and middle school was Willard Tolman was his name. Went in and talked to Willard, and I'd like to be in band. Okay, well, what do you want to play? Well, I don't know. Do you have any other instruments? Well, I play piano. Well, why don't we put you on clarinet because you use your fingers and it'll dexterity and all these educational goals and everything. And I said, okay, that's fine. What do we do? And he said, well, there's Susan Hawkins. She was first-year clarinet player. And he said, go sit down by her and watch what she plays and how her fingers move and just copy her.
Oh,
I was learning by rote, and so it worked. So, yeah.
Wow. And so then you moved to Arizona. And if I'm not mistaken, you went to a pretty unique school there.
Phoenix Technical High School. It was like all the performance schools in California and New York. Yeah, it was a 4-year high school. I mean, you could take anything from aircraft, whatever, to body and fender, to auto mechanics, to cosmetology, to nursing, to whatever.
So you're specializing even in high school then?
Yes.
And you chose the arts.
Yep, I love it, even thinking about it. Other people give me hate stares. My first year, I took English, math, and band for an hour, and then the afternoon was 4 hours of music. Second year, I took English, biology, and band, yeah. And then the rest was music. My junior year, I took English, and government and band. My senior year, I took civics and an elective, which was typing and band for 4 hours, and that was it. I was learning how to arrange and write and doing it by the time I was a sophomore. 4 hours, and we had a jazz band or a stage band before anybody even knew what they were in high schools. And that was the other thing with Chorale and Cantari. I wanted the directors, and I wanted the students especially, to see that you didn't have to be stuck in just singing one style of music, at the exception of the other. It didn't take long for show choirs to catch on. I don't know what I had to do with it. I suppose a little bit. And I always would give the directors a copy of the music that we were singing that year, if they wanted to do it for the next year, for contest or whatever. And they always appreciated that. So it was an educational thing, I think, for the teachers as well as the singers. I don't care what you're doing. There's still room in music, and if it's just chorus, why 2 days a week we'll do show choir and 3 days a week we'll do concert choir or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's a great story. I mean, music has just been such a huge and important thread your whole life. And the reason I'm sure, for many of the relationships you've formed over the years, many of your best friends and loved ones, like me, through music.
Yeah.
I don't mean loved ones like me. I mean, like me, you have loved ones through music.
Whatever, Daniel. Edit that part. We won't have any problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great time.
If you could give a piece of advice to John Putnam at age 16 or something, 17, what would you tell that person?
Whoa. I know exactly what it is, but I played my first professional dance job in Globe, Arizona, which was a wide-open mining town, and I mean wide open. Red lights on every other door, and 2.5 hours is up in the mountains, copper mines. At about 11:30, a fight started, and then they cleared the hall out and locked it up and swept the floors, and then came back in and in charge of a mission to come back in to go from 1 to 6 because it was a sunrise dance. They never caught on. I don't know why. But and the other one, when we were done playing, and I was 13, for God's sake, we had to stop by one of the houses of ill repute, and all the guys piled out. And I'm thinking, but they're married. They even sent a gal out, and she was trying to coax me to go in, and I said, just get your hands off of me, and all that sort of stuff. But then I saw this guy, what I thought was sniffing powdered sugar up his nose. But it wasn't, So when I went home to my dad, how did it go? Well, it was good, and we had a good time. Had a fight we watched, and this guy, and I said, but this one guy kept snuffing powdered sugar up his nose. What was that all about? And he just went, we need to talk, John. So we went in and sat down. And probably somebody should have arrested them for child endangerment or whatever, 13, getting exposed to all of that. But anyway, he sat down and he just said, I'm just telling you this once. He said, if you want to mess around with the girls or the women, it'll be great. You'll have a good time. But if you get sick or if you get them pregnant, you're responsible for them because you're an adult. If you can do this, you have this responsibility. And he went down the whole thing. If you want to do this, if you want to play cards, if you want to gamble, if you want to do drugs, any of those kinds of things, and he really spelled it out. And he said, I will tell you this, I will always stand behind you, but I will never bail you out. I think I gave you that speech before tour. I will always stand behind you, but I'll never bail you out. And my junior year, so I'd have been 16, we were playing a job in the Regency Hotel on Central Avenue. I mean, the hotel in Phoenix, like probably the one in Lincoln was when it was new. And they were having a private party on the penthouse suite, 9 to 1. And here I am at trio playing piano. I would say by 11 o'clock, it was a full-blown bacchanal orgy going on. I mean, and I was just, my eyes would have been, like a, but we finished it up at about 12:30. The cops came, took everything. We went down in the elevator, closed, unclosed bartenders, musicians, everybody, bellhops, I don't know. They all went in the paddy wagon, and away we went. And so about 2 o'clock, I called home, and my dad answered, and he said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm calling you. And he said, what's going on? I said, well, we had a little problem at the dance, and, well, where are you? Well, I'm at the police station. Oh, what did you do? Well, we got arrested, and they closed the dance down, and where are you? And I'm in the police station. Oh, I could still hear him in my mind. When are you going to come home? And I said, well, the hearing is at 2 o'clock on Monday. And I said, well, I'll pick up my car at 3 and I should be home by 4. Won't you come and get me? Why should I? That's what he said. And I just thought you would know. I'll see you about 4 o'clock. And he hung up the phone on me, and so,
wow.
So that was a tough love. But he said, what part of that talk that I had, did you not believe me? Did you not trust me when I said that? And I said, well, I do now.
Did you understand and respect what he was doing at the time, or did it cause trouble for you in your relationship with your dad? I mean, he seems supportive of the music. Yeah, he was, I respected my dad. We didn't really have, I don't know, a lot of people, I don't know what your experience was. I got along with him fine, but we really didn't connect until after I was in college. Gotcha. So I don't know why. Mean what you say and say what you mean, and don't deviate. And you know that in the classroom and stuff too. Everybody wants to be friends. They don't want to be parents. We all have a lot of friends, but the tough job is being a parent. But another situation that I had, that when I was in the 8th grade, I ditched for the day. And there was a river outside of town where I lived, and I was by myself, and I just wanted to ditch. And by noon, I was bored. So I came back to school, which was really stupid, but I came back to school and changed my clothes, and I was there all afternoon. And then the teacher came in, Mrs. Keller, and she said, when school is over, you need to go and see the principal. Okay. I mean, I didn't have a clue. Okay. So I went down to the principal's office, and the deputy sheriff was in there, and the principal was in there. Where were you this afternoon, John? Well, I wasn't here. We know you weren't here. Just where were you? Well, I was down at the river for the morning, and then I decided to come back to school. Okay, well, we know where you were, and we just wanted to be sure, but we got to punish you. Well, the punishment in those days was grab your ankles. And they had those paddles with the holes drilled in them and, and everything else. Uh-huh. Oh, man, that hurt. And the principal said after a while, he said, and they weren't holding back much. Well, I'm getting kind of tired. You want to do it for a while? Oh, I'll take 2 or 3 whacks at him. And they did. Oh, my God, that made a lesson. I mean, that was cruel and whatever. But I deserved it, so. It sounds like if you could talk to yourself as a student, you'd say, listen to all these lessons people are trying to teach you. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But nobody does that. No, you got to test it. We do it even as adults sometimes. Mm-hmm. In all the 29 years that we toured, I never had anybody arrested. No girl ever got pregnant. Nobody ever was knocked on the door and you're out of here. There was shoplifting. None of those games were ever played. If there's a problem and you miss or you get busted or taken because you were being jerks in the room, we would go straight home. Whether it's the first night, the middle night, or the last night, go straight home, and Chorale and Cantare has ceased to exist. Mm-hmm. Now if it's worth it to you,
If you think it's worth the risk, then go for it. But that's what the rules are.
Yeah.
They never tested me.
Yeah, everyone had a lot of respect for especially as time went on, I think the history of the group, you're not just ruining it for your fellow students that year, but you're shattering something that has taken a long time to build.
Yeah. It was a learning experience. I know back to my very first day on the campus, I went in to see the dean of students after class, and I said, well, we had a pretty good first day. I'm about half asleep. And he said, so you're the new music man? And I said, yeah, I interviewed with you. And he said, I know, I'm just asking. And I said, yeah, I guess I am. He said, what plans do you have? And I said, well, we're going to do the choir and band and I taught fine arts, get the music and the folders and get things going. And he said, where are you going to get the money for this? And I said, it was in the budget. And he said, not anymore. Because he was the dean because the president had left and he was the acting dean. We need it for here, 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 and here.
Oh.
And I said, well, we'll just have to figure out something. I can write some things. And we played. We sang our first performance for Happy Chef, which was on the corner where, what's there now? It's on the corner of 33rd Street and 23rd Avenue. But anyway, we sang a concert for a breakfast for the board and the teachers and all that sort of stuff. And I heard somebody kind of giggle. So we were done, and we were tearing down. And I said, okay, what was so funny? And that was a no-no. And they just burst into laughing, and they said, we couldn't help it. And I said, okay, tell me what went on. Well, we were singing Freedom Song about the ships on the sea and all that sort of stuff. And the same time we were singing, two traders with ships went by and we saw them out the window. And it was
sailboats or something, right?
Sailboats, yeah. And it was like, okay, I don't know what that is. But
where does Freedom Song come from?
I wrote it for Chorale and Cantare.
When did you write that song? It's a nice song.
Oh, I think it was the second year of Chorale. No, it must have been the first year with Cantare, I think.
When do you think you wrote your first song?
Oh, my gosh.
And was it any good?
Well, of course.
Mine weren't.
Millions. I don't even know. Probably the first songs were more Chorale Cantare things. I did more adaptations of serious things with chorus, just like I did, with the Bless Thy Holy Spirit, the Ave Maria, and whatever. I didn't do a lot of composing for a while. I did a lot of arranging.
Yeah.
But
even at a very young age, weren't you arranging for?
Yeah, I was a sophomore at Phoenix Tech, and we arranged concert music if we wanted to or if we could, or that was one of our projects. And that was my final exam. I had to write the first of my master's degree. I had to write the first. I did the national anthem, and I had 3 hours to complete it, and no piano or no anything.
Oh wow!
So that was one of my compositions, But I did some things for Cantare that were more of the Glenn Campbell or Rod McEwen. He wrote some nice songs. Biggest hit was Joy. We have Seasons in the Sun.
Oh, okay.
But, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And even James Taylor. So they were mostly things of that. But I wrote a song, and the first line, it was like, dee-da, dee-da, the laid-back electric piano and everything else. And the first line was, take my hand and walk with me. Know my love, touch my face, and I don't know what else. But it was in the manuscript was KNOW, know my love. I want you to know how much you love me. And it was that dee-da, the laid back thing. And then somebody came up after an assembly and said, I didn't understand that song. Well, what didn't you understand? Well, why did you say know my love? Because they were interpreted, no, get away. Whoops, change that in a hurry. So those are little things that you don't really see or don't hear so much.
One thing I like to ask people is, and it's a stupid question, but...
There is no thing as a stupid question.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because there's a few coming up.
Okay. I was going to say yes, there is, but I don't want to say that.
What would you consider a piece of music or an album that you would have to have with you in a desert island kind of scenario? People always talk about your top 5 desert island albums or songs. Is there something you would want to listen to forever and ever?
I never thought about that. So it's a stupid question.
Yeah.
So I can't answer it. I was in high school during the rock and roll, mid-50s. Bill Haley and the Comets walk around the clock, and I thought, it'll never make it, not with big bands. And so I was in high school, but But I like the big bands.
You were making your living playing those kind of jazz big band gigs, weren't you?
Yeah, I was making good money.
Mm-hmm.
I liked, I really, I really liked Stan Kenton and Woody Herman and the really true big bands. Don Ellis, do you know who Don Ellis was? Mm-hmm. He was the first band to electronify, all that sort of stuff, and feedback. And Les Paul and Mary Ford were the first one to overdub, and he did it with his whole 18-piece orchestra.
Wow.
I like the Moody Blues. Mm-hmm. There's a song called To Our Children's Children, and it's I still have that album, I think. And it was really cool because I listened to it, and it was a good recording and everything else. And then Eric, who was one of my tenors, he said, "Oh, you got that?" He said, "Oh, Coach, you got a copy of that." They called me Coach, too. Don't ask me why. And I said, but see, there is another thing. I would always tell students, because they would get in trouble, "Can we call you John?" in college. They never did. I was Coach or Mr. P, and I said, "You can call me whatever you want to call me, as long as you're respectful." Because you could say Mr. Putnam, and they never took me up on it, but that's what it was. And he said, "I want to play something for you." And I said, "Okay." And I know, I have this album. Have you listened to it? He said, "Put on the earphones." And so I did. And it's about, listen to the song, "A Child Awakes," "Wonder All Around, a Child Awakes." And the break, it was going, and it was going like, do-dee-do-dee-do-dee-do. It sounded like a space thing. And when I had the earphones on, it felt like it was right here, and then it would do this. And I could visualize it going right out there and coming right back in through my head. And I thought, oh my God, if I'd never, he taught me a lot that day, So I'd probably listen to Moody Blues, anything big band. But see, I lived through that stuff. Mm-hmm. My biggest thrill, Kenton was in Phoenix for a job that night, 9 to 1, Riverside Ballroom, which burned down, which they all did. And, we went early. Jim Miller, did you meet Jim? Was he?
Yeah, I did.
He owned the Jimmy Dorsey Orchestra. I still talk to him. And he went with me, and we went at 6 o'clock, and we knew the guy at the front, so he let us in. So we walked in, and there he was sitting there with a drink, or I don't know what he was. He was sitting there and just smoking and whatever, and we kind of, "Oh, hi, young man. How can I help you?" Well, we got introduced, and this is what we're doing. And one of our projects, because we had to write arrangements in the style of Jan Garber, Stan Kenton, Duke Ellington, it didn't matter, because the voicings were all different, as you know. So we we did this and we did this. And I just said, well, if there's ever a time when you're touring, and we would just appreciate it if you would look it over, and you don't have to send it back, or you could write to it. It would just be such an honor for us.
So you gave your arrangements of Stan Kenton style music to Stan himself.
Yeah. And I said, so this is what I do. And he said, well, we can I'll work something up. Don't worry about it. And I said, okay. And so the second break they took, and I didn't even see that he was passing out music. Well, guess it was.
And they just sight read it up there?
They sight read it. Audience was right there. And he said, "We have 2 young men who think they would like to write for our band and blah, blah, this and all that. So we're going to put them to the test. So go ahead and dance and listen if you want." Everybody just laughed and applauded. And I thought,
wow,
think of the confidence that was.
Yeah.
That they were willing to do that to people,
Wow.
And it sounded pretty good. I mean, they both did. And he autographed it, and I still have it somewhere on that score.
Wow.
It was called September in the Rain. And then my junior year at ASC, Kappa Kappa Psi, which was a band fraternity, did a jazz festival and competition at ASU. And I was one of the judges. I was teaching then. Guess who walked into the room as one of the judges?
No way.
Stan Kenton.
What?
Yeah. And he kept looking at it. He didn't stare at me, whatever. And then we took a break after we rehearsed 3 or 4 groups, and he kind of walked over and he said, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" And I said, "No, but I sure know you." And I said, "Riverside Ballroom in Phoenix." "Oh, yeah, 2 or 3 years. Yeah, we're doing that arrangement,
Whoa.
And so then that, again, I used to say to Chorale and Cantare, you never know who's in the audience. You knew the story about the really bad job in Prescott we thought we had. It was 4 o'clock in the city square. It would be like 4 o'clock in Frankfurt Square and all the people. And we did the show, and they didn't want to do the whole show, and it was cold. But we did, and this lady came up, and she said, "This was very good. I apologize." And she says, "I'm just on my way through. Are you going to be here tonight?" Because I always say, if there's nobody there, we'll have a good rehearsal. If there's one person there, we'll do a show.
Yeah.
And she came that night to a church in Prescott. And 3 or 4 days later, here she came at Disneyland. And that was my cruise ship connection. We didn't know who she was,
Yeah.
you know. So that was it with Stan, and he just did all that sort of stuff. And he said, when we were done with, he said, "Are you busy?" And I said, "What do you have in mind?" And he said, "Well, I'm looking for a new concept in the albums that I'm doing. And I'm doing an album, and it's going to be called The Romantic Style of Kenton. And I want them all to be standard ballads." And he said, "How would you like to do 3 of them?" Ask me again.
Yeah.
No, I didn't say that. And so I said, "Sure." And he said, "If you could have them in 6 weeks, you know," and he said, "I'll pay you." And this was a lot of money in those days, $150 a piece, $450. But it's my arrangement then, you know,
Yeah,
because, and I
forever.
said, "Well, that's fine with me. I would rather have the money and in college than get a check for $50 in royalty next month and 20 cents the next month." And he said, "Well, we'll work well together." And he said, "Just send it over." And so that's what we did. And it's on the album. I arranged, ghosted several things for him. That was the epitome of jazz, big band. There were a lot of musicians. Don't tell me about Woody Herman, or don't tell me about Artie Shaw, or don't tell. If I can't play with Stan, I'm not going to play. I'll go back and sell shoes or something.
Yeah.
Oh man, he just would do whatever he thought for the betterment of music. He rode the buses with the band. He didn't ride in a special car or anything. He was like a father to him. So
Wow.
yeah, so I don't know what it would be. My tastes were always changing. But that's what it's all about. You know, artists don't pay the Mona Lisa twice or the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
They fix it and they're done with it.
Yeah.
And then they learn from it. That was my other story. God, we'd be here all day. You knew that. My least favorite song, I would tell you, is
Okay.
Proud Mary.
Oh,
I hate that song. Did I ever tell you that story?
because you've played it so many times?
Yeah. And we were playing at Howell's. It was a wedding dance, and he wanted to hear Proud Mary, and he was very drunk. So we played it. 2 or 3 songs later in the set, he came back up. "Oh, you're going to play Proud Mary for me." "Sir, we just played it." "Where were you?" "Well, I was over getting a drink, you know."
Yeah.
We played that thing 5 times. Always had an excuse. It was a good band, good musicians. And he came up again, and so we played it again. And I went up after the job, and I said, "Larry, I'm done. I'm not going to do it again. It's no longer fun." "Well, who are we going to find keyboard?" "That's your problem. I just can't. Should be easier to find somebody to play Proud Mary again, for God's sake." You know. So my favorite, now I'm going to forget that. Serenade on strings or Serenade 2 strings. If I'm in a wrong mood or a right mood and it's late at night and very lonely, I just burst into tears. And the other one is Anything Almost by Wagner. And have you ever
It's kind
read
of dark.
it? But yeah, he was probably the greatest composer on earth, and he knew it, and he told everybody. And he would write a whole opera, invite his friends, not very often because they didn't last very long, over on a Sunday to hear it. And he insisted on playing the whole thing on the keyboard and singing every role while they sat there for 3 hours listening to this crazy man playing this opera. But the joke was he probably was the world's greatest composer ever. That's another story. But did you take fine arts? I didn't put you in fine arts, did you?
No, what was up with my advisor?
I don't know. That was a class that it was different every year. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I didn't know what you would, I had to know you as a student and I did a few things the first week of class to, like things like I showed a film called Pigs. They just walked in and I blanked out the title. And when everybody was seated, turned on the film projector, and then before it got to the end, I turned it off. And I said, "All right, now take out a sheet of paper, put your name on it, number it from 1 to 10. And so I said, "Okay, here's the first question. What was the name of the film? Second question, what country was Panama Hats made? What season was it in? What, just those kinds of things." And so they finished them, and I said, after the first question, I said, "Does anyone have them all right yet?" And they looked at me like, "You're out of your mind, man." And then at the end, "How many of you got them all right?" And it was like, none of them,
Yeah.
But they've loved that class. That was a fun class to teach. I even taught a class laying fat on my back the first day, lecturing to the ceiling. They just wanted to see what I was going to do next. I was a terrible teacher. But anyway, okay, well, let's start from the top. What's the first thing you did? Well, we put down our name. How many of you put your name down, printed or written on the top left hand or the top right hand of the sheet? And everybody raised their hand. Why did you do that? Did I tell you to do that? Well, no. why didn't you turn it sideways or do it on the back? Or because we're conditioned, that was the purpose of the class. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was the name? And this one girl said Pigs. And I said, what? Who would name a film Pigs? I mean, that's the most silly thing I ever heard. She went kind of like this. A day in the life of the pig. Nice day of a farmer. They came up with all these names. And so I said, and what about you? Are you going to stick with pigs? Well, yeah, I guess. And I said, good, because you're right. And she went, oh, my God, Where were Panama hats made in? Panama, Ecuador. so that's what it was like, and there is no right answer. And I said, if you take a multiple choice, if A seems to be right, do you even read B, C, or D? Well, some don't. And they said, but it would be harder for you to grade the test. You'd be looking for all these. I said, that's my problem, not yours. You're the creative person. Huh. But I'd say that about fine arts. You're going to teach me and I'm going to teach you. And if I don't learn something, and if you walk out of this class with all of the answers, then I've not done my job. And your tests might be something that somebody else talked about in class, and I'm going to make that a test question. Then I had a volleyball player who said, I really, really like your class, and I want to come every time, but I get a headache every time I'm here.
Right.
Oh, well.
Can you remember a time somebody was extraordinarily kind or generous to you that stands out? We just talked about Stan Kenton. That stands out to me. But.
Yeah. Well, there was one. Did you know the college sued me at one point?
Yes. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about it or not.
Well, no, they did, and it was wrong, and we all knew it was wrong, But Roger Augsburger stepped up and he picked up all of my costs of the attorney and everything else. And nobody knew but Roger. He said, we'll take care of it. There were people along the road that just helped me a lot. Yeah.
One thing I like to ask people is, how do you want to be remembered?
Well, the one thing that I said that I would like to put on the tombstone was that he cared.
He cared.
That's the first one. And the second one would be, he always looked out for the silent ones. So,
what does that mean to you, the silent ones?
The ones that really, for whatever reason, actually a student wrote that when I was at McClintock in my manual, the ones that you knew that they were just afraid to come out of their shell, as opposed to the ones, I'll sing that solo. What do you want me to do? I mean, those types, Mm-hmm. Yeah, names come up like fireworks. Yeah. But all of the purposes of what we did as teachers to allow people to become who they really were wanting to become. And I do miss it, I'll say that. But I don't miss what it's become. If I could go back, well, I probably couldn't now, but I would sure try. If I could go back and just direct the choirs and work with the fine arts classes or whatever it was, and not put off all those meetings and memos, have a meeting to see if we should meet next week and discuss. Right. Yeah, I could not stand that. I would go crazy. But I honestly would say I could still just stay out of my space and let me do. You hired me to do the job. Yeah. Let me do the job.
We become teachers to, guess what? Teach.
Yeah. Oh, that's a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last question.
Okay.
And it's stupid.
There is no such thing as a stupid question. Yes,
we talked about Stan Kenton. Is there any other, I like to ask people if you've met a celebrity. Is there any other famous person you've run into that's kind of a fun story? Nobody
would know Stan Kenton was a celebrity because he was never really that popular. I mean, he was, but he was a musician's musician. And he won all the Downbeat Awards and everything else, but most of the populace would have not known who. They would know who Benny Goodman was and who Glenn Miller was. But that was more people's music. My dad had a chance to tour with Lawrence Welk. And so he did. And my mom stayed in Columbus. And then she got a call one night, and it was Lawrence, and they were in New York, and they'd run out of money. So he wanted to send her some money, which he did. So he packed all of his drums and took the bus home. And then about 2 years later, he was going on the road again and wanted him to come. And she said, you have to choose. You're going to be married or you're going to be a musician, but you're not going to do both. And so he said, well, I guess I'm going to be married. And that was the year he got on TV, and the rest, as they said, was history. Yeah. So, and he wanted to build a dance hall, which was a big thing in the 50s, which was going to be located where Super Saver is now, in the that whole big drive-in theater in the Taylor Park. And she said no. Well, of course, that land has been worth millions and millions of dollars now. Yeah. So there again, How do you weigh those things, you know?
Yeah.
But where was I going before that?
We were talking about celebrities, but Lawrence Welk is kind of a well-known one. I don't know if you ran into. I know you ran into Vincent Fernier. No, that's Alice
I know.
Cooper.
My son went to school with him.
Yeah.
I've talked with him several times. We used to go to dinner. He's crazy, but he's not. He's crazy like a fox.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Maynard Ferguson. He played at the college one time.
Huh.
Stayed at the New World Inn, so he stayed up all night and going to fly now.
Oh.
His range was out of the piano, higher and lower. When he started playing trumpet, the only note his teacher would allow him, this was in Hollywood, was third space C. And he said, I worked and I did this and I did that. And he said then, and he did pretty well, and then he said then he would hang the trumpet from 2 strings from the ceiling, and I would have to walk up to that trumpet and just hold it to steady it. And it works because it's all from the diaphragm.
Yeah.
Gosh, who else? Roger Wagner, you don't know who that was. He was the god of choral music. He did a lot of music scores and a lot of those westerns when they were singing and all the men and stuff. That was Roger Wagner. You know, I didn't really know him, but a lot of those performers were really pretty approachable. Not like, I mean, if they were off having a drink or, you know, and you could kind of come and stand up behind them or be away from them a little ways and let your presence known, and a lot of them would say, come on, sit down. You're on. And others would not, so you could know how to approach them. Yeah. But there were a lot of them because they depended on those people for their income. I mean, they bought the tickets to come in. But I remember I met a lot of the guys over the years from the Kenton band. Shelly Manne, the drummer, they said that he would play the ballad style of any song with a folded long ways $100 bill on the ride cymbal. That's what his touch was. So all these little anecdotes, you know. So
that's great.
Yeah. Well, you've done very well. I'm not proud of you, but I'm proud with you. And that's a whole different. And I just have enjoyed what we've continued to keep going. You got to take a chance and you've got to trust. And people are afraid to do that.
Thank you, sir. You've been a important figure in my life and many others.
It's been a nice ride, and I hope it's not over for a while yet.
Yeah, right. Me too. Me too. Thank you for taking some time to
that's what
come and sit down for a while.
We teach. We teach and we learn.
Yes, sir.